The wedding dress hung in Sarah Beth's bedroom like a ghost, its ivory silk catching the morning light that streamed through the cabin windows. 5 years it had waited there, gathering dust and memories, a monument to promises that never came to pass. Sarah Beth Morrison touched the delicate lace with trembling fingers, just as she had every morning for the past 1800 days. The fabric was still beautiful, still perfect, still ready for a bride who had never walked down the aisle. "Today's the day, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. "Today I stop waiting." Outside, the sounds of Sweetwater Valley were already stirring to life. Cattle lowing in the distance, the creak of windmills turning in the morning breeze, her father's heavy boots on the porch as he prepared for another day of running the largest ranch in 3 counties. All of it familiar, all of it safe, all of it the life she had built. After her heart had been shattered into pieces, too small to mend, Sarah. Beth had been 19 when Thomas Garrett rode out of Sweetwater Valley with a promise to return. In 3 months, with enough money to marry her proper. He'd been 22, full of dreams and determination, convinced he could make his fortune in the Colorado gold fields and come back to claim the woman he loved. That had been 5 years ago. For the first year, Sarah Beth had waited with the patience of a woman in love. Every day, she'd walk to the post office, hoping for a letter. Every evening, she'd stood on the ridge overlooking the Eastern Trail, watching for a familiar figure on horseback. She'd turned down 3 suitors, including the banker's son and the new preacher, because her heart belonged to Thomas Garrett. The second year had been harder. Doubts crept in like weeds in a garden. Maybe he'd found gold and forgotten about her. Maybe he'd found another woman. Maybe he was dead in a mining accident or killed by road agents. But still she waited, because that's what you did when you loved someone with your whole heart. By the 3rd year, the townspeople had started calling her an old maid behind her back. At 22, she was well past the age when most frontier women married. Her father, stern and practical, had begun pressuring her to accept one of her remaining suitors. But Sarah, Beth couldn't bring herself to say yes to another man when her heart still called out for Thomas in the dark hours before. Dawn, the 4th year, had nearly broken her. Word came through traveling merchants that there had been an avalanche at Whispering Creek Mine. It's not far from where Thomas had said he was heading. 17 men dead, they said. No survivors found. Sarah Beth had worn black for 6 months, mourning a man she wasn't even sure was dead, grieving for dreams that felt as buried as the miners under tons of Colorado snow. But hope was a stubborn thing, and Sarah Beth couldn't quite kill it, no matter how hard she tried. What if he wasn't at that mine? What if he was injured somewhere, struggling to get back to her? What if he'd lost his memory and was wandering the frontier, unable to remember the woman who loved him more than life itself? Now, at 24, Sarah Beth knew she couldn't wait anymore. Her father was aging, the ranch needed a strong man to help run it, and she needed to build a life that didn't revolve around a ghost. Yesterday, she had accepted the proposal of Marcus Henley, the town doctor. He was a good man, kind and steady, and if she couldn't have love, at least she could have security and companionship. The wedding was set for next month. Sarah Beth was packing away the ivory dress when she heard horses approaching fast. Multiple riders, from the sound of it, and coming hard. She looked out the window and felt her blood run cold. It was Sheriff Davidson and his deputy, along with Dr. Henley and 3 men she didn't recognize. Her father met them at the front porch, his weathered face creased with concern. Sarah Beth couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw her father's shoulders stiffen and Dr. Henley's face go pale. Whatever news they brought, it wasn't good. Sarah Beth. Her father called, "Come out here, girl. There's something you need to hear." She smoothed her skirts and stepped onto the porch. Trying to ignore the way her hands shook, Dr. Henley stepped forward, his kind eyes full of sympathy. "Miss Morrison," he said gently, "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." "About Thomas Garrett?" Sarah Beth's heart stopped. After all these years of wondering, of hoping, of grieving, was she finally going to learn the truth? "Is he?" She couldn't finish the question. "He's alive," Dr. Henley said quickly. "But Sarah Beth, he's hurt. badly hurt. And he's in trouble. Relief and terror warred in Sarah Beth's chest. Alive? Thomas was alive. What kind of trouble? Her father asked, his voice sharp with concern. Sheriff Davidson spoke up, his face grim. He's been shot. Twice. And he's wanted for robbery and murder in Colorado. The words hit Sarah. At Beth like a physical blow. That's impossible, she whispered. Thomas wouldn't. He could never... I'm sorry, Miss Morrison, the sheriff continued. But the evidence is pretty clear. He and 2 other men held up a bank in Denver 3 days ago. A teller was killed. Thomas was identified by multiple witnesses. Sarah Beth shook her head violently. No, you don't understand. Thomas isn't like that. He's good and honest and... double quotes. She trailed off, realizing how naive she sounded. How well did she really know the man Thomas had become in 5 years of hardship and disappointment? Where is he now? Dr. Henley asked quietly. That's why we're here, one of the strangers said, stepping forward. He wore a deputy marshal's badge and had the hard look of a man who'd seen too much violence. Name's Marshal Pike. We tracked him as far as Miller's Creek, about 10 miles east of here. He's holed up in the old line shack there. It's bleeding bad from what we can tell. And you want to arrest him? Sarah Beth's father said. We want to bring him in alive if possible, Marshal Pike replied. But he's armed and desperate. Could go either way? Sarah Beth felt the world spinning around her. Thomas was alive, but he was hurt and wanted by the law. Everything she'd dreamed of for 5 years was crumbling before her eyes. I need to see him, she said suddenly. Every man on the porch stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. Sarah Beth. Dr. Henley said carefully, that's not. It wouldn't be safe. If he's really done what they say he hasn't, Sarah Beth said firmly. I don't care what evidence you have. I know Thomas Garrett, and he is not a killer. Marshal Pike shook his head. Ma'am, I understand you have feelings for this man, but you don't understand anything, Sarah Beth interrupted, her voice rising. You don't understand that I've spent 5 years wondering if he was alive or dead. You don't understand that I've mourned him and hoped for him and nearly driven myself crazy thinking about him. And now you tell me he's 10 miles away, hurt and alone, and you expect me to just sit here and do nothing? What exactly are you proposing? Her father asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Sarah Beth lifted her chin, calling on the same stubborn courage that had sustained her through 5 years of waiting. I'm proposing that I go talk to him. If he's innocent, maybe I can convince him to surrender peacefully. If he's guilty, she swallowed hard. If he's guilty, then I need to hear it from his own lips. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Marshal Pike spoke up. Ma'am, that's about the most foolish thing I've ever heard. This man is wanted for murder. He's wounded and cornered, which makes him doubly dangerous. Then what's your plan? Sarah Beth challenged. Storm the line shack and shoot him down like a dog. Because that's what's going to happen, isn't it? You'll say you gave him a chance to surrender. But really, you're hoping he puts up a fight so you can end this cleanly. Marshal Pike's face reddened. And Sarah Beth knew she'd hit close to the mark. Dr. Henley stepped closer to her. Sarah Beth, please think about this rationally. We're supposed to be married next month. You have a future to consider. Do I? Sarah Beth looked at the man who was supposed to be her husband, seeing him as if for the first time. Marcus Henley was a good man, but he wasn't Thomas. He had never made her heart race or her knees weak. She had accepted his proposal out of practicality, not passion. Marcus, I care about you. Truly I do. But if there's even a chance that Thomas is innocent, that he needs help, then you're willing to throw away everything for a man who abandoned you 5 years ago. Dr. Henley's voice was pained, but not angry. He was too good a man for anger, even now. Sarah Beth felt tears pricking her eyes. I'm willing to get the truth, one way or another. Her father stepped forward then, his weathered hand coming to rest on her shoulder. Marshal, he said in the commanding voice that had once led cattle drives and fought off Indian raids, what if my daughter and I accompany you to this line shack? She talks to him from a safe distance, tries to convince him to surrender. If he won't listen to reason, then you do what you have to do. Marshal Pike considered this. clearly not liking the idea but recognizing the practicality of it. A woman's voice might indeed reach a desperate man better than shouted demands from lawmen. "I don't like it," he said finally. "But I suppose it might work. You'd have to stay well back, and if shooting starts, ... we'll be ready to get out of the way," Sarah Beth's father assured him. And so it was decided. Within an hour, a grim procession was riding east toward Miller's Creek. Sarah Beth rode her favorite mare, her father beside her on his big gelding, while Marshal Pike and his men formed a protective circle around them. Dr. Henley had chosen to come as well, his medical bag tied behind his saddle, his face set in lines of worry and resignation. The old line shack sat in a grove of cottonwoods beside a narrow creek. Built years ago to house cowboys during roundup season, it was a sturdy but simple structure, with thick log walls and one window facing the trail. Smoke was rising from the chimney, and a horse, thin and exhausted-looking, was tied to a tree nearby. "Marshal." Pike called a halt about 100 yards from the cabin. "That's close enough," he said. "Miss Morrison, you can call out to him from here." Sarah Beth's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. After 5 years, she was about to see Thomas again, but not the way she'd dreamed. Not with him riding up to claim her, successful and proud. Instead, he was cornered and wounded and accused of terrible crimes. "Thomas," she called out, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Thomas Garrett." "It's Sarah Beth." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the cabin door opened slowly, and a figure appeared in the doorway. Sarah Beth's breath caught in her throat. It was Thomas, but changed almost beyond recognition. He was thinner, harder, marked by years of harsh living. His clothes were torn and bloody, and he moved with the careful gait of a man in significant pain. But his eyes, those deep blue eyes that had haunted her dreams, were unmistakably his. "Sarah Beth." His voice was hoarse with disbelief. "Lord Almighty, is that really you?" "It's me, Thomas," she called back, fighting not to cry. "I'm here." He stepped out of the cabin, and she could see the extent of his injuries. Blood had soaked through his shirt in 2 places, and his left arm hung awkwardly at his side. He looked like a man at the end of his rope. "You shouldn't be here," he said, and his eyes drank in the sight of her as if she were water in the desert. "This is no place for you." "Marshal Pike says you robbed a bank," Sarah Beth said, cutting straight to the heart of it. "Says you killed a man." Thomas's face went through a range of emotions: pain, anger, despair, and something that might have been relief. "And what do you say, Sarah Beth? Do you think I'm capable of murder?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with 5 years of separation and the knowledge that people could change in ways both wonderful and terrible. Sarah Beth looked at the man she had loved, the man she had waited for, the man she had grieved. She saw the weapons at his hip, the haunted look in his eyes, the way he held himself like a man ready for violence. But she also saw the young man who had courted her with wildflowers and poetry, who had treated her with gentle reverence, who had wept when he left because he couldn't bear to take her into uncertainty. "No," she said firmly. "I don't believe you're a killer, Thomas Garrett, but I think you're in trouble. I think you need help." Thomas closed his eyes, as if her faith in him was almost more than he could bear. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I didn't kill that teller," he said, his voice carrying to everyone present. "I wasn't even in Denver 3 days ago. I was laid up in Pueblo with a fever that nearly killed me. Then why are there witnesses saying you were there?" Marshal Pike called out. Thomas's laugh was bitter, because Jake Morrison wanted it that way. "You remember Jake Morrison, Sarah Beth? Used to run with my cousin Billy before Billy got himself shot over a poker game." Sarah Beth nodded, remembering the wild young man who had been trouble from the moment he could walk. "Jake's been using my name for months," Thomas continued. "Seems I built up a reputation of sorts in the mining camps, not for robbing and killing, but for being fair and honest in my dealings. Jake figured he could trade on that reputation, get folks to trust him before he robbed them blind. Can you prove any of this?" Marshal Pike demanded. "The doctor in Pueblo can vouch for me being there," Thomas replied. And there's a hotel clerk who'll remember me because I was too sick to pay for 3 days running. He was threatening to throw me out when the fever finally broke. Sarah Beth felt a surge of hope. Then we can clear this up. We can prove your innocence. But Thomas was shaking his head. It's not that simple, Sarah Beth. See, I did some things I'm not proud of these past few years. Nothing like murder, but, well, let's just say I wasn't always as careful about whose money I was taking as I should have been. What does that mean? Her father asked. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. It means I robbed some men who probably deserved it. Crooked mine owners who were cheating their workers. Card sharps who were fleecing honest cowboys. I told myself I was doing right, taking from those who took from others. Robin Hood, Sarah Beth whispered. Something like that, Thomas agreed. But the law doesn't much care about my reasons. I'm wanted for a half-dozen robberies across Colorado and Wyoming. Even if I can prove I didn't kill that teller, I'll still hang for the rest of it. The truth of it settled over them like a heavy blanket. Thomas might be innocent of murder, but he wasn't innocent of everything. There's got to be something we can do, Sarah Beth said desperately. There is, Thomas replied, and his voice had gone quiet and determined. I can surrender to Marshal Pike here, face whatever justice is coming to me, and hope they believe me about the Denver job. And if they don't, Thomas met her eyes across the distance between them. Then at least I got to see you one more time. At least I got to tell you that not a single day has passed in 5 years that I haven't thought about you, that I haven't regretted leaving you behind. Sarah Beth felt tears streaming down her face. Then why didn't you come back? Why didn't you write? Because I was a fool, Thomas said simply. Because I went looking for gold and found only fool's gold? Because I made mistakes that turned me into someone you wouldn't recognize? Because I thought you deserved better than a broken-down outlaw with nothing to offer but empty hands and a price on his head. That wasn't your choice to make. Sarah Beth cried out, all the pain and anger of 5 years pouring out of her. You should have let me decide what I deserved. You should have trusted me to love you even if you came back poor. Thomas staggered as if her words were physical blows. You're right, he whispered. God help me, you're absolutely right. I was a coward, Sarah Beth. I was so afraid of disappointing you that I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Marshal Pike had been listening to this exchange with growing impatience. This is all very touching, he said, but we have a job to do here, Mr. Garrett. I need you to throw down your weapons and surrender peacefully. Thomas looked at the marshal, then back at Sarah Beth. If I surrender, he said, will you do something for me? Anything, Sarah Beth said without hesitation. Will you remember me as I was when I left you? Young and hopeful and full of dreams? Not as what I became? Sarah Beth shook her head fiercely. I'll remember you as what you are right now. A man who made mistakes but who's trying to do the right thing. A man who loved me enough to let me go, even though it was the wrong choice. Thomas smiled then. The first real smile Sarah Beth had seen from him. And for a moment she could see the young man she had fallen in love with. All right then, he said, reaching for his gun belt, but before he could unbuckle it, the sound of approaching horses made everyone turn. A new group of riders was coming fast from the E6 men with the hard look of bounty hunters or hired guns. Damn, Marshal Pike muttered. That's Jake Morrison and his crew. Sarah Beth watched in horror as the newcomers reined in their horses about 50 yards away. The man in the lead was indeed Jake Morrison, though he bore little resemblance to the wild young man she remembered. He was harder now, meaner, with the cold eyes of a man who killed for money. Well, Morrison called out. If it isn't Thomas Garrett. Been looking all over creation for you, cousin. I'm not your cousin, Jake Thomas replied, his hand moving back to his gun. And I'm not taking the blame for what you did in Denver. Morrison laughed. Oh, but you are. See, I made sure plenty of folks got a good look at the man claiming to be Thomas Garrett. And wouldn't you know it, they all described someone who looks an awful lot like you. Why? Thomas demanded. Why drag me into your mess? Because you were convenient, Morrison said with a shrug. Because nobody would look too hard for Jake Morrison if they thought they were chasing the famous Thomas Garrett. And because you've been making me look bad with all your noble outlaw nonsense. Marshal Pike spurred his horse forward. Morrison, you're under arrest for bank robbery and murder? Morrison's men spread out, hands moving to their weapons. I don't think so, Marshal. See, we outnumber you. And we're not particular about who gets hurt in the crossfire. Sarah Beth's blood ran cold as she realized what was about to happen. Morrison wanted Thomas dead, not captured, but dead because Thomas alive could prove his innocence. And Morrison didn't care who else died in the process. Sarah Beth, her father said quietly, we need to get out of here now. But before they could move, Thomas stepped fully out of the cabin, his own gun now in his hand. Let them go, Jake, he said calmly. This is between you and me. Oh, I intend to let them go, Morrison replied, with a cold smile. Right after they watch you die. Wouldn't want any witnesses saying Jake Morrison was anywhere near here when the famous Thomas Garrett got shot down like a dog. The silence that followed was pregnant with violence. Sarah Beth could feel the tension building like a thunderstorm, could see the way the men on both sides were preparing for gunplay. And then Thomas did something that surprised everyone. He holstered his gun. All right, Jake, he said. You win. I won't draw on you. Morrison blinked, clearly not having expected this. What's your game, Thomas? No game, Thomas replied. I'm tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of being something I never wanted to be. If you're going to kill me, then kill me. But let these people go first. Sarah Beth felt her heart breaking all over again. Thomas was surrendering, giving up his life to protect her and the others. It was noble and selfless, and completely unacceptable. No, she said, spurring her horse forward before anyone could stop her. Sarah Beth, don't. Her father called out, but she was already moving. She rode straight toward Thomas, placing herself between him and Morrison's guns. If you want to hurt him, she called out to Morrison, you'll have to go through me first. Sarah Beth, get out of here. Thomas shouted, but she ignored him. I've spent 5 years waiting for this man, she said, her voice carrying clearly to everyone present. I've mourned him, hoped for him, dreamed of him, and I'll be damned if I'm going to lose him now to scum like Jake Morrison. Morrison's face twisted with anger. Lady, you're making a big mistake. Move aside, or his words were cut off by the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked. Then another. And another. Sarah Beth turned to see her father and Dr. Henley flanking Marshal Pike. All 3 men with weapons trained on Morrison's crew. They were outnumbered. But they had the advantage of position and surprise. I think you're the one making a mistake, Morrison, Marshal Pike said calmly. You're going to holster your weapons and surrender, or we're going to have ourselves a very short and very ugly fight. For a moment, the standoff held. Then, one of Morrison's men, younger and apparently smarter than the rest, slowly raised his hands. I'm out, he said. This isn't worth dying for. That broke the spell. Within moments, Morrison found himself abandoned by his crew. Facing 3 determined men with rifles and 1 very angry woman who clearly wasn't going to back down, this isn't over. Morrison snarled, but he was already backing his horse away. But it is, Thomas said, stepping up beside Sarah Beth's horse. His gun was back in his hand, steady and sure. It's over, Jake. I'm turning myself in to Marshal Pike. I'm going to tell everyone who will listen about what really happened in Denver. Your game's finished. Morrison stared at him with pure hatred. You always did think you were better than the rest of us. No, Thomas replied quietly. I just tried to be better than I was. Sometimes I succeeded. Sometimes I didn't, but I never stopped trying. And with that, Jake Morrison and his remaining men rode away, leaving dust and defeat in their wake. The next few hours passed in a blur. Thomas formally surrendered to Marshal Pike, who proved to be more interested in justice than glory. When Thomas told his story, the complete story, including his own crimes, the marshal listened with the patience of a man who had learned that truth was often complicated. Dr. Henley tended to Thomas's wounds, which proved to be serious but not life-threatening. The bullets had passed cleanly through, missing vital organs, but leaving him weak from blood loss. And through it all, Sarah Beth stayed by his side, holding his hand while the doctor worked, offering him water when his lips were dry. Simply being there in the way she had dreamed of for 5 years. As evening approached and camp was made by the creek, Sarah Beth and Thomas finally had a chance to talk privately. They sat beside the water, watching the sun sink toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "What happens now?" Sarah Beth asked quietly. Thomas was silent for a long moment. "I'll go to trial. If I'm lucky, they'll believe my story about Denver and I'll only hang for the robberies I actually committed. Don't joke about that." "I'm not joking," Thomas said gently. "Sarah Beth, I need you to understand something. Even if I beat the Denver charges, even if they show mercy for the other things, I'm looking at years in prison. Maybe the rest of my life." Sarah Beth turned to face him fully. "And do you think that changes how I feel about you? It should. You have a life here, a good life. Dr. Henley is a fine man who can give you everything you deserve." "Marcus released me from our engagement this afternoon," Sarah Beth interrupted. "He said he could see that my heart was never really his to begin with." Thomas stared at her. "Sarah Beth, you can't throw your life away on a man who might never be free again." "I'm not throwing my life away," she said firmly. "I'm choosing it. For the first time in 5 years, I'm choosing what I want instead of what's practical or safe or expected. And what do you want?" Sarah Beth reached for his hands, holding them tightly in her own. "I want you, Thomas Garrett. However I can have you. For however long I can have you. If that means waiting for you while you serve your time, then I'll wait. If that means visiting you in prison every chance I get, then I'll visit. If that means fighting for your freedom until my dying day, then I'll fight." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying," Sarah Beth replied. "I'm saying that I love you. Not the boy you were when you left. Not the man I imagined you might become. But you as you are right now. Flawed and wounded and afraid, but still trying to do the right thing. I've done terrible things. Sarah Beth, I've stolen and lied and hurt people, and you've also protected the innocent and stood up to bullies and just now risked your life to save mine," she countered. "You're not perfect, Thomas. Neither am I, but we can be imperfect together." Thomas pulled his hands free and cupped her face gently. "I don't deserve you. That's not your choice to make," Sarah Beth said, echoing his words from earlier. "That's mine, and I choose you." When he kissed her then, it was with 5 years of longing and loss and love that had never died. It was the kiss of two people who had found each other again despite impossible odds, who were willing to face an uncertain future together rather than live safely apart. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. "Will you marry me?" Thomas asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it's not the proposal you dreamed of, and God knows I have nothing to offer you but a heart that's belonged to you since the day we met." "But yes," Sarah Beth said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, and there." Beside Miller, "It's everything," he said simply. They had their challenges, of course. Some people in Sweetwater Valley never forgot that Thomas Garrett was an ex-convict. Some never stopped whispering about the schoolteacher who had married beneath her station. But they also had friends, is Dr. Henley chief among them, who judged them by their actions rather than their past? Thomas proved to be everything Sarah Beth had believed he could be. He worked the ranch with skill and determination, building it into one of the most prosperous spreads in the valley. He was honest in all his dealings, gentle with the animals, and kind to everyone who worked for him. And when their first child was born, a daughter with Thomas's dark hair and Sarah Beth's stubborn chin, he wept with joy and promised her that she would grow up knowing she was loved beyond measure. Years later, when their grandchildren asked about how Grandma and Grandpa had met, Sarah Beth would tell them the story of the letter that never came and the love that waited anyway. She would tell them about the importance of second chances, about the difference between justice and vengeance, about the courage it takes to forgive both others and yourself. But mostly, she would tell them about love, the kind of love that survives separation and doubt and the harsh realities of life. The kind of love that sees past mistakes to the heart beneath. The kind of love that believes in redemption even when redemption seems impossible. And Thomas, listening from his chair by the fire, would smile and remember a young woman who had stepped between him and his enemies, who had chosen love over safety, who had seen something worth saving in a man the world had written off as lost. Together, they had proved that sometimes the best stories are the ones that don't end the way you expect them to, but exactly the way they need to, under the endless western sky. Their love had found a way to survive and thrive, a testament to the power of faith, hope, and the kind of love that never gives up, never stops believing, and never stops fighting for what matters most. The wedding dress still hung in their bedroom, no longer a monument to broken dreams, but a reminder of promises kept and love fulfilled. And every morning when the sun rose over Sweetwater Valley, it illuminated a life built not on perfection, but on forgiveness. Not on what might have been, but on what was and what could be. When two hearts refuse to give up on each other,